what that noise was. Bloody hell.
Did you recognise it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Good. How are you?
So, happy June.
Ah, thanks. Happy June to you, too.
Yeah.
Glad the weather's improved.
Yes, it has improved. It's great.
Yes.
So, podcast 6 of the year.
Right. Gosh.
And this time we have Daft Punk, Primal Scream, Thea Gilmore, Jamie Culum, Beth Hart and Joe Bonamassa, and what have I missed?
You've missed Little Boots.
I missed Little Boots, yes. Yeah. So, rather than doing rambling, which I'm sure we will do at some point.
Oh, we always do that, so let's get straight to it.
Let's get straight to it with Daft Punk and Random Access Memory.
Like the new album by Chic. I don't get that one in early. Do you know what? Every so often an album comes around that the critics tell you will love regardless. This is one of those albums. I think this record's brilliant.
What,
you want more? You want more?
Well, I think you should go on a bit further.
I think what's brilliant. I'm trying to avoid some of the stuff that many other reviewers have already said. I think what's fantastic about this album, though, is the way that they've just completely thrown everything out of the existing Daft Punk shelf, where trophies such as their debut album and others are situated, and they've just gone straight back to playing live music. I think it's very well put together. And there's obviously a lot of love has gone into the production of this particular record. Artists that have tried to do similar things in the past have sometimes had a bit of a, it's been a bit of a not quite worked or it's just not come off quite right. This just fits perfectly both into their pre-existing discography and also in the sound that they're trying to achieve here. An absolute loving tribute to the music of the 1970s, particularly electronic music, but not necessarily so. Nile Rodgers peppered throughout.
Yes,
which
indeed.
is just genius, and an absolute pleasure to listen to. I'm sorry, will.i.am. I think this has become my dance album of the year. Need I say more? Do you want me to say more? I can go on.
No, that's all right. Well, you can probably come back.
Do you want to interject?
I'll interject and then we can come back. I also think this is a surprisingly good record. I have to confess that since their debut album, which I liked, my love for Daft Punk has waned quite dramatically. In fact, I've found them rather dull in the last umpteen years. Yeah. So I didn't hold any great hopes out for this record particularly. But it is, as you say, a triumph. It's almost like a self-contained summer compilation album. Yeah. As you say, you've got a bit of a Chic attack going on. Yeah. No more so in the thing with, I think, Lose Yourself to Dance, which features Pharrell Williams, which is just... It is just a Chic song.
It's a Chic record, but made in 2013. Yeah.
And his distinctive guitar sound also crops up on the opening track on the album, which I can't remember the title of.
Give Life Back to Music.
Yeah. And the other song that's got Pharrell on as well.
Get Lucky.
Yeah. Which is, I think, the weakest of the three he's on, if you like.
Really?
Yeah. But elsewhere, I think it's interesting because you've got kind of indie dance kind of covered with the... Julian Casablanca, or whatever it is, Casablancas thing. I quite like him vocoded.
Yes.
It's quite amusing. You've got almost what I thought was like almost a dance show tune in Touch.
Yes.
You know, you could imagine it being in a kind of show or on Glee. Oh, I'm sure it will be on Glee because they do everything. But is that kind of, performance? Or maybe it's just his vocal, I don't know. But that's what I kind of thought.
I can also hear the Ibiza-style house remix that no doubt will appear in August as well. Yeah. And it still works there.
And then running through the whole album, but particularly on the song Fragments of Time, you've got that whole kind of Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan kind of influence. Yeah. So that kind of West Coast America thing going on underneath everything else, which I really, really like. But surprisingly, my favourite track on the album is Giorgio by Moroder. 9 sprawling minutes of pure madness.
Yeah.
Which involves, part interview with Giorgio, part kind of typical Giorgio Moroder tribute dance track.
Yeah.
Improvised jazz fusion.
Yeah.
In the middle, and then kind of a prog rock ending.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. It's a masterpiece. Brilliant. As you say, 9 minutes of just pleasure. I love the transposition of the interview with the music that accompanies it, and he talks about bringing in the click, and then the click start.
Yes.
And you're right there in this Daft Punk Giorgio Moroder world, which they've created in this track, which they create within minutes of the track starting. It's just genius. I have to disagree with Get Lucky. I actually really like Get Lucky. I haven't got. I don't know if you follow Culum around on Twitter.
I do.
I haven't got the crippling Get Lucky addiction that she's got, but I'm getting close to sort of Get Lucky levels of Get Lucky. It's just a brilliant summer tune. About dancing.
It is a good tune.
And ultimately about sex, but it's brilliant.
I don't think it's a bad tune. I just happen to think it's of the three that Niall's
that he's on. Yeah,
it is the weakest
for
me. But it's it's not a short record.
No,
but as a kind of summer soundtrack, I think it delivers.
Yeah, it really does. So that's it. That's up there.
Yeah.
I'm really disappointed we started with that because
you want to work up to that.
I feel we had to work up to that. Okay. I feel that everything else is just going to come off a bit poor. But
okay, yeah. Well, moving swiftly on to Primal Scream and More Light.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying if I said that the thought of 70 minutes of Primal Scream was something I was greatly looking forward to.
Was it that long?
Yeah. The band I've never particularly warmed to, and I think part of this problem may have been seeing them live at Swansea University in 89 when they were. I think it was either just before. I think it was just before Screamadelica came out.
Yeah.
Yes. And their kind of cod wannabe Stones warblings, ramblings just didn't connect to me at all, and I don't think Screamadelica is a classic album. There, I said it. And the last couple of albums that they've released as well, which I've kind of dipped into, have also done nothing to me as well. So, moving on.
Did you ever listen to Exterminator?
Yes.
How did that compare to this? Because I'm interested. I've never listened to Exterminator.
I think this is a much better record than that.
Okay, right. So, moving on.
Is all I'll say. So, obviously, speaking of long, this kicks off with a 9-minute track of its own.
Yeah.
And as the band rightly say, it is 2013.
Yeah, well observed.
And this is kind of... It's weird, because in fact, the first two tracks on this album are probably as experimental as it gets, and they are both very experimental. They take up the first 16 minutes of the record, because the second track goes on for 7 minutes too. And whilst I've always criticised them for being Stones obsessives, for me, this album had more of a 70s Bowie influence, strangely enough, particularly in the kind of instrumentation, interesting kind of incidental music almost in the background of particular tracks. And this opening track's a good example of that. It starts off with the kind of Eastern influence, and then you've got the rambling beat with hints, like I said, hints of 70s Bowie. A kind of diatribe on the state of modern Britain lyrically, self-indulgent beyond all belief. But the 9 minutes just drifts by seamlessly. Like I thought, I quite like this.
Yeah.
And it rolls into then a kind of Led Zepp-esque riff of Rivers of Pain.
Yeah.
Some more kind of Middle Eastern jazz fusion in the middle. Seems to be the theme this podcast. And again, for whatever reason, loved it. I don't think the album recovers from this opening duo of tracks particularly, although it's hard not to like straight-out rockers like Invisible City, and also good are, Countryside, Hit Void, which sound like an impression of Jesus and Mary Chain doing David Bowie. Tenement Kid, great song, which also has a nice musical interlude again. And even Goodbye Johnny,
Yeah.
Which, although my only problem with that was every time I said Johnny, I kept expecting them to kind of go into a kind of Fine Young Cannibals cover version. Whereas the song kind of has more of a Twin Peaks soundtrack kind of vibe to it.
It's not Fine Young Cannibals.
No. So that's pretty much takes up the first half of the album, if you like. Then the album plummets a stone.
It does.
In my view. It really just gets back to the reason that I haven't liked Primal Scream for, well, ever particularly. And there's only saved... I can't believe I say this. Only saved by the Rolling Stones impersonation at the end.
Which I really liked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a fun tune, but is the kind of stuff that they can knock out in their sleep.
I concur with quite a lot of what you've said. I found opening tracks very interesting. And then some of the sort of the key songs you've mentioned there, Tenement Kid, etc. Good to listen to. Then yes, it does dip somewhere in the middle, and recovers with almost Screamadelica-like sounds. The last two tracks, Walking with the Beast and It's Alright, It's Okay.
Yeah, Walking the Beast is okay, I suppose.
Which, and the final track, sort of goes on a little, but fades nicely and sort of completes the album. So I didn't mind that at all. But I'm actually, I'll sort of counter what you said. I'm actually a big fan of Screamadelica. I obviously didn't have the bad experience that you had. But to be honest with you, everything they've ever done ever since, I've sort of never really sort of been tuned into or turned on by. So I've struggled at it, as I sort of alluded to already. Haven't really followed them recently. By recently, I probably mean the last decade. And some. Manny from the Stone Roses was in the band for a while. That entire chapter passed me by as well. So it's an okay record. Has good moments.
So 2 down, 4 to go. Move on to the second album from Little Boots called Nocturnes.
Now you'd probably expect me to like this.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Again, like the Primal Scream record, oh dear, here it comes, not that blown away by this particular record. I thought I'm going to really enjoy this record. I was a big fan of the first album.
Hands.
Although, that said, I was then trying to remember the sort of the key tracks and sort of hits off that, one or two of which I just about managed. No, I found that this album just didn't quite hit the mark for me. I'm a fan of this sort of music, very much a fan of this sort of music, so perhaps I'm being overly critical. But after the opening tracks of Motorway Confusion, I found that I sort of my own interest dipped. And I sort of really find that a shame because I'm sure after a few more listens, which this probably deserves, it's actually quite a solid electro pop, synth pop record. But I just felt that it perhaps didn't quite deliver.
Yeah, it's interesting record, this, because obviously her first album, as you say, was highly influenced by 70s, early 80s synth pop, so very much Yazoo, Human League. In fact, there was a duet with Phil Oakey, I think.
Yes,
on the
there
debut album.
was. Yeah, see.
Whereas this one, pretty much, it's more in your late 90s, early noughties, Kylie, St. Etienne kind of feel.
Yeah.
So tracks like Beat Beat and Every Night I Say a Prayer could quite easily be Kylie.
Every Night I Say a Prayer in particular, a great song. Kylie, I think, would nail it.
And has a little hint of a kind of DM kind of synth.
Exactly. I mean, it ticks all my boxes, you know. There's clearly a DM nod. There's a PSB thing running all the way through it, as on the first album. But I just felt, you know... I know my electro pop. I know what I like.
Yeah, I probably liked it a bit more than you then. Whilst I certainly prefer,
I'd like to be positive.
Yeah, I certainly prefer the sound of the first album.
Yeah,
but I think if people are into Kylie-esque type stuff, then I think this isn't that bad a record.
No.
I mean, you've got things. Let's say this. There's a kind of house kind of beats and particularly house piano sound running through the whole album. So if you like that kind of stuff particularly, this appeal to you. Oh. And I think there are a couple of great pure pop moments on it. Crescendo being one, which is I think destined to be a kind of live gig set ender, and Broken Record. Even though that harks back a bit musically and thematically to the song stuck on repeat off the first record. Probably my favourite tracks on the album are the two kind of, well, I'd almost call them kind of Saint-Étienne covers, which are Strangers and All For You, where she sounds very much Sarah Cracknell-y. I really like those two songs a lot. My problem with the album overall, though, is whilst she's almost certainly going more for that kind of Kylie sound, I think a lot of it ends up a bit more Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
Oh, right. Gosh, okay.
Particularly on Confusion, funny enough, the second track that you usually like. I think she sounds very Sophie Ellis-Bextor on that.
I suppose so. Oh, there you go.
And also, I could have done without the final track,
Satellite.
Yeah, Satellite, which is just dreadful. It's like a bad reimagining of Madonna's Ray of Light.
Yeah. Okay, I quite like Satellite. Concur on Strangers, though. I quite like Strangers.
Yeah, Strangers is a cracking tune.
Yeah, it's a cracking tune. So I mean, some of what you've said, certainly, particularly in relation to house as an influence, certainly in the intervening years between this and the last time, it's actually 4 years.
Yes.
She has been doing DJing, and rather than performing as a pop artist, and that certainly reflects perhaps in the musical styling here as well. And I think that also adds a certain maturity to it compared to the first album.
It's certainly more polished.
Yeah.
Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, though, is debatable.
I think a really cracking third album is out there for her. I hope. I very much hope so. But I think that last comment reflects something I read in a review this week about the album, and actually that review was very scathing, which I thought was unnecessary. But
yeah, I would say I think if you're missing a bit of kind of classic late 90s, early noughties Kylie type dance music, this is
that late 90s revival is
not
just
bad record.
It's just round the corner, so you know.
I'll watch out for that.
Give it a year or two. Anyway, moving on.
Speaking of someone that won't be featuring in that late 90s revival,
no, certainly not.
We move on to Jamie Cullum and Momentum, his I think 6th album.
Right. Okay.
And the first where he has decided to write virtually all the tracks. I think the last few albums have been kind of half his own stuff and half covers. There are only 2 covers on this one, Love for Sale and Pure Imagination. And again, as with the first album that we reviewed, I was dreading this record quite dramatically.
Right. Right.
And wasn't really looking forward to listening to it at all.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
So it comes as somewhat of a shock and almost pains me to say so, but I actually quite like this record.
Did you?
Yeah. I said it. Look,
there you go. Yeah, it's loud.
Yeah. Whilst I'd always had appreciation for his skill as a pianist, obviously, which goes without saying, I'd always found the majority of his output to be something that didn't really do it for me at all, and his over-preening kind of standing on the piano kind of performances always used to annoy me as well.
Not in the Parkinson school then?
No. But however, I actually find this kind of attempted blend of pop, soul and jazz actually kind of works a charm. It starts off with a nice kind of foot-stomping, kind of heavily drum-led, the same things, slips into then a kind of piano intro that's very much in a kind of Motown kind of sounding kind of thing for Edge of Something.
Yeah.
And Edge of Something also kind of, I would say, also is kind of, look at me, I could do a Bond theme kind of song as well. Yeah, because it has that kind of orchestration going on in it. Next track, I can give a not particularly fussed about. But then you get 3 tracks in a row that are very much kind of about what he's about, really, or what people think he's about, which is the whole kind of jazz thing. So you've got When I Get Famous, which he wrote himself, which has elements of Dave Brubeck's Take 5 kind of beat going on in the background, which I think is quite funny. Got some amusing kind of lines in there. You've got interesting reimagination of the Cole Porter song Love for Sale, featuring Roots Maneuver, which is kind of funky and kind of really good, in fact. And then a surprisingly good version of Pure Imagination. For those who don't know, they're Willy Wonkas, originally recorded by Anthony Newley for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I'm sure that is there some sort of reworking of the royalties there to the family?
I don't know, but it is a piece of pure imagination. He's managed to kind of almost. I'm not sure where he's dropped it a key, or he's certainly slowed it down and done something different with it. Yeah. And it's a really, really
it's a really good version.
Pleasant surprise.
Yeah, really good.
And then elsewhere, you've got a couple of tracks that are verging on your kind of keen Coldplay type thing. So Get a Hold of Yourself and You're Not the Only One. But both are actually quite jolly pop tunes. So I actually got to the end of this album kind of thinking, this is actually a pretty decent album.
Yeah. It's... Well, we've listened to worse.
God, yeah.
It's it's a good. I wouldn't say middle of the road because actually it has quite a bit of inventiveness to it. It's a good listen. It's a good album to put on in the background on a Sunday afternoon when you're sort of doing the garden or preparing a meal or what have you, and sitting down for that meal. It's a nice sort of leisurely, bluesy soul album.
Yes.
Which surprised me as well. It also manages to be a good pop album in places too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Take Me Out, and
some of those earlier tracks. And he has got a pop singer's voice.
He does indeed. Yes.
So the diversity of his own vocals is great. It means that he can do different things. So you never know each track is very different. So you never know from one track to the next what you're going to get. Which keeps the interest, the momentum in the album.
Indeed.
Thank you. A couple of tracks you did mention from, I think I must have been listening to the slightly longer deluxe edition.
Well, you mean that has momentum itself on it?
Has momentum itself, but I actually quite like the final track, Comes Love, as well.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, I can understand why Momentum didn't make it onto the track.
Yeah, one of the weaker ones.
Because I think it is one of the weaker ones, because of the extra songs. I think, as you say, Comes Love and Unison, which also has some really nice jazz piano in it, are both actually quite good and would have fitted in quite nicely with the record itself. But Momentum itself was a bit of a dud, I thought.
Quite. But other than that, good album. Solid.
So, changing course.
Very much so.
We move on to the 14th album.
Wow.
By Thea Gilmore, which, considering she's only 33, is quite an impressive...
It's quite an achievement.
...output. And it's called Regardless.
And by no means a diluted achievement. I thought this was a stunning record. I really enjoyed it. More so than I thought I was going to.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. How to pull this to the fore? She has such a listenable, easy voice to listen to. And yet
not popular on Radio 2 for nothing.
No, but it's quite a powerful voice, and it manages to convey a lot, both both in her tone and in her lyrics. I was really drawn into this album. I know we've reviewed a couple of her albums before. We've certainly listened to a couple of albums before.
Yeah.
I think this is probably my favourite of. We haven't listened to all 14. I certainly haven't. I know you might have done.
I have.
I actually found this a really engaging album. Probably one of her. If you're a fan, which you are, but even if you're not, I think you'll find this a very pleasant record to listen to. A bit, again, as we were saying earlier with the Daft Punk record, a lot of love has gone into the crafting and the producing and the polishing of this record, and that shines through. I'm sure I'll name some tracks, because I'm sure you will in a moment, but certainly the opening couple of tracks and My Friend Goodbye as well, I found quite haunting.
Yeah, that's got some really nice... I made a note of the lyrics on that. There's this great line which is, some things we'll always know, hearts and distances grow.
That's
Just
it.
give me enough rope and I'll still hang on to hope. Which is, I think, lovely.
Lovely lyrics. Certainly I will not disappoint you.
Yes.
Yeah, but this record certainly didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
Apart from the Alan Partridge there.
Yeah, I think this is a very mature album. I'm sure there will be some Gilmorists, if you like, that think it's a bit too polished and a bit too mainstream when put up against some of her early stuff. But then again, you've got to kind of grow and evolve as an artist. And as you say, I think no matter how the overall sound of the album sounds, great English there. It's when it comes down to it, it's still about the actual quality of the songwriting.
Yeah.
And the songwriting, as you say, is good. Yeah. Whether it's kind of radio-friendly pop, such as Something to Sing About, Love Came Looking for Me, Started You Mean to Go On, which are the kind of things you will hear on Radio 2 if you haven't already heard them on Radio 2.
Yeah.
Which, and Something to Sing About has that classic Speak to Me of California, Speak to Me of Wigan Pier line in it as well. And there's not many songs you'll hear California and Wigan Pier in the same couplet. So that's one of the reasons I like her on that. And as you say, the second song, This Is How You Find a Way, which has that kind of It's a Beautiful Day refrain running through it. You can imagine the BBC using that during the summer in any kind of sporting kind of context when they need one of those kind of indents to have music going on in the background. Elsewhere on the album, there's interesting use, because obviously she comes from a kind of folk background, so you have the hints of that coming through, particularly on things like Regadless and This Road, which I think are two of the album's stronger tracks, and the growers, ones that definitely may not grab you initially, but after a couple of listens are the ones that stick in your head. Yeah. And then one of the most interesting tracks on the album is Spit and Shine, which kind of starts off like you're listening to a kind of 80s Bundu Boys album, or you've put on Graceland by mistake, with that kind of, kind of African guitar kind of sound. And yeah, it's just a good album that shows off what she's about quite well, and hopefully if people do cotton onto it either through Radio 2 or various other things, will lead them to check out some of the 13 other albums in the back catalogue.
And just to add to that, we often sort of have a little moan that albums are too long. This album was too short.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, actually, I mean, it caught my breath at the end. I thought, oh gosh, is that it? I'd have had more, but
you heard it here first.
It's perfect, in its length. But a nice short album, which won't disappoint.
No. So we come to the end, and this month the end is Beth, Hart, and Joe Bonamassa, SeeSaw. This is the second collaboration between the pair. American singer Beth Hart and Joe Bonamassa, who is one of the most highly regarded young blues guitarists in the world, and also does a stint doing DJing on Planet Rock. amongst other things, and was most recently in kind of a rock supergroup Black Country Communion with Glenn Hughes and Jason Bonham, and recorded a couple of albums of kind of pseudo 70s rock inspired by kind of the likes of Deep Purple and things like that. And this album, like their previous outing together, is essentially a blues record of covers of classic songs by the likes of Billie Holiday, Tina Turner, Lucinda Williams, Etta James, Aretha Franklin, Donny Hathaway. I think if your taste is kind of Blues Brothers Commitment soundtracks albums kind of thing, or if you just like great songs done well, this pretty much does what it says in the tin.
Yep.
You know, it blends a very good singer, they're great guitarists to deliver foot tapping blues R&B.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Christ, they even managed to do a fairly respectable version of Nutbush City Limits, which in itself is no mean feat.
A difficult song to do.
Yeah. Lots of people have made a hash of that. So yeah, I think it's one of those weird months where I'm getting to the end of the 6th album and thinking I actually like all the albums we reviewed this month. They've all been different in their own way. But again, this starts off, funnily for me, it appeals to me greatly because it starts off, it's topped and tailed by 2 Billie Holiday songs, or songs that Billie Holiday recorded. Them, Their Eyes, and Strange Fruit. And strange enough, my 2 favourite Billie Holiday songs. And you couldn't get songs that are more different from each other in style or lyric either. Them, Their Eyes is very much upbeat, happy, swinging track. And indeed, Hart and Bonamassa keep to that quite well. And Strange Fruit, which is also covered by Nina Simone and various others over the years, is, in my opinion, one of the finest songs lyrically ever written. Because I think it still has lyrics that have that power to shock even now. So it's the opening paragraph is southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. So it's a nice happy song about lynchings and the Deep South, but it is a kind of, you know, heartfelt kind of track, and they do great versions of that. Elsewhere on the album, Close to My Fire, which is the second track on the album, is the most recent cover. In fact, that was originally recorded by a band called Slackwax and used on a BMW advert last year.
Right, yeah.
So people might recognise the song from that, but I think their version of it on here is much better. It's more sultry, and the guitar solo in it is just delightful. Same with If I Tell You I Love You, also great, and a really great guitar solo. And I could pick several other tracks as well, and pretty much say the same thing. It's just an album that's quite fun to listen to. It's good singing, good guitar playing. Obviously, they've got a good bunch of other musicians around them, delivering an album that could have been one of those horrible kind of almost kind of karaoke style covers albums that would have you running to the hills, but instead is one that actually you can sit down and actually listen to and think, actually, yeah, that works.
I agree. And you know, to be fair, it's a lot more original than the sort of Commitments kind of records. You know, my only doubt. I mean, you've sort of praised, rightly so, the attempt on Nutbush City Limits. For me, the definitive version is Tina. So,
well, yeah,
I found that one as a sort of I shot a little bit low of my expectations there. But actually, other than that, as you say, a really good collection of songs. My word, we have got into a sort of bluesy mood, haven't we?
We
this
have,
particular podcast. And funny, you mentioned Deep Purple. On Strange Fruit, I was thinking Pink Floyd. Yeah, and it's such a contrast, that track, with everything, the 9 or 10 tracks that have preceded it.
Yeah, and their version of it is
talked
very,
about the lyrics, but
yeah.
Musically, it goes off into completely different territory.
Yeah, it's a very stripped down version of the track. Very atmospheric. I mean, obviously lyrically, it's a very atmospheric tune anyway. But it is different from most of the other versions of this song that you'll hear.
I could see that as sort of mid 70s Pink Floyd, riding right through that. And again, I think that's down to the guitar playing, which is just fantastic throughout. So I can't really add to that.
So there you go. 6 out of 6.
We've kind of agreed on most things there. 6 out of 6.
Yeah. So we're going to have to try much harder to find albums that we don't like.
Yeah, we always hit this point pre-summer, I think. And then it all seems to go wrong. Actually, no, I was remarking to you earlier the other day, we seem to be hitting a seam this year that we've perhaps not hit for a while, of actually quite good to excellent albums most months.
I would agree, yeah. We seem to have been very lucky, or perhaps the listener very unlucky, since we really haven't had much to lay into.
No, not at all. Even
when we've picked albums that we thought we may end up, at least one of us laying into.
Yeah.
We haven't particularly.
We've actually ended up liking, and there's been a few examples of that this year so far. For me, it's all about Daft Punk, really, but everyone's going to be saying that all summer, so...
This is true.
I'm going to pick Thea Gilmore.
There you go. I would probably agree.
Good.
So again, we agree again.
A probable agreement once again.
Yes. Of course, there are probably some people sitting out there thinking, whilst all this is very interesting, and I can understand why they did Daft Punk, why haven't they reviewed the new Black Sabbath album, the new Laura Marling album, the new Queens of the Stone Age album, the new PSP album, and stuff like that, given that we're, approaching the end of June?
Yes. Well,
there are several reasons for that. I mean, it could be that we just thought these albums deserved to get an airing.
Yeah.
Or it could be some kind of old school kind of TV recording Christmas episode in the middle of
surely
another
not.
Month type thing.
No.
For some reason or other.
I can't see that big reason at all.
No, and we wouldn't do anything like that.
No. But I'm sure all those albums are coming soon.
Perhaps. So, anything else to
add? No. Like the new PSP single, as you mentioned it.
Check out our website at cttbmusic.co.uk. Also, follow us on Twitter at cttbmusic. The CTTB Music Podcast is a Vineland production.